All right, good morning and good evening, everyone around the world. We have uh, the third day for RN Pharma 2022. To kick off today, I'd like to introduce Dustin Tingley, who is a professor of government in the government department at Harvard University. He's also Deputy Vice Provost for Advances in Learning, Faculty Director for the Vice Provost for Advances in Learning, Data Science and Technology Group. And a special note, Dustin actually helped present and was instrumental to RN Pharma in 2018 when we founded. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dustin.
Great. Thanks so much. And hey, everyone. Really glad to be here. It was a lot of fun setting up back in, 2018, the previous times with RN Pharma, longtime R user, longtime R abuser, and really thankful for what everyone's doing. So you've got a political scientist giving in some opening remarks to a pharma conference, and it's right after Election Day here in the United States. So you're going to get a couple jokes before I get serious. So, what we study is different. What I study is in the top row, and some of what you study is in the bottom row. And it's been really interesting over time, though, to nevertheless see, pharma and biotech, you guys are really doing amazing work. You can solve headaches, pain, cancer. And I'd like to apologize. Politics is really good at creating these things. So there's a certain symbiotic relationship maybe between what I study and what you study in a rather perverse way. I'd also note that, pharma and politics are very similar in some other ways. So uncertainty is ubiquitous, right? Will this drug work on these people? What are the sort of heterogeneities of the impact of this? But then in politics, will this campaign commercial influence these voters versus those voters? Or we even ask even broader questions. Does globalization lead to more or less military conflict? But we're also interested in questions of the why, not just of the whether something works or whether something doesn't work, but why does it work? I'd also take a moment to apologize that some of the people and organizations that we tend to study seem to themselves want to be pharma startups, and the COVID era of suggesting some rather bizarre things is a case in point of that. I hope we don't inflict your industry with much more with these things, but sorry about that. Now, I want to make an observation that not only do we sort of share some of the sort of approaches, but the way we do things is also very similar. When I get to talk with folks in my community that work in pharma, it's shockingly similar, the sort of workflow that is involved. At the end of the day, we're starting with some sort of theory that we want to be able to test. We have to think about what the research design would be, power analysis, how are we going to measure things. We figure out a workflow for collecting data. We will think about visualization, right? That sometimes getting kind of a broad peek at how things look in our data. There are steps of estimation and exploration. We might go back to visualization. There are increasingly in the social sciences a lot of thought about causality. That's something that in pharma you guys have obviously, given the more experimental nature of some of your work, you've thought a lot about. And identification can come in a variety of ways. Point identification, thinking about things like Mansky bounds. Replication is obviously crucial as well. And while you all don't have to go, while we don't have to go through sort of regulatory approval processes, nonetheless, there is that similar feeling. And then there's extrapolation. So what have I learned from this study and how does it, extend? So this is just to point out that our worlds are actually very similar. And then to point out that we all benefit from the same things, right? And here we're talking about the sort of open source R community. It's a huge open source community, and there are real pride and incentives to build packages, apps, there are real pride and incentives for helping each other. The number of times I've been helped by someone, who knows what industry they work in on Stack Overflow. And these sort of things exist now. Back in the mid 2000s when I was learning R, there was a little bit less of that. But now we have a whole ecosystem. R Stats, it's on Twitter. Who knows where it will go next, Mastodon, whatever, or stay on Twitter. And meetups that are run, different groups, not just this group, but other groups. It's really, at the end of the day, a sociological phenomenon that's, very impressive. And so, as I reflect in my more administrative roles here at Harvard, that the sort of combination of different organizations, including Posit, and the communities that all of you create, this might be one of the most broadly impactful private, public, NGO, et cetera, effort in the last 10 to 15 years. And that's really exciting. So to conclude, I'll just conclude my comments about politics and pharma. I'd like to see this happen in the not too distant future. Robert for president. I'll stop there and hand it back over.